Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to you all to this session titled Health, Safety, and Dignity of Sanitation Workers. This is an operator stage event organized by GIZ, the Sustainable Sanitation Alliance, Susanna, the Fecal Sludge Management Alliance, FSMA, and WaterAid. My name is Franziska Volk, and on behalf of the Congress host UWOPAD UN Habitat, I'm happy to send greetings from the UN campus in Bonn in Germany to our worldwide Congress participants. So what is ahead of us in this session? Earlier this week, we had a session on utilities making safe and inclusive sanitation a reality. Today, we're zooming in even a bit more to the individual level, the sanitation workers. Sanitation workers play a very important role on the ground, and yet there is very little research on their working conditions and well-being. This session will talk about efforts to bring sanitation operators and workers to the fore and efforts of local governments to promote essential workers' rights and their dignity. For your best event experience, I would like to mention two technical aspects. First is please join the participants chat on the right side. If you're not signed in yet, please do so with your email or your social media accounts. Second is we would be really happy to receive your feedback in the survey on the page if you scroll down below. So without further ado, I'm now handing over to the moderator of the session, Shobana Srinivasan, who's with GIZ and the Senate Susanna Network. Shobana, thank you very much to you and the team for bringing this session and the important topic to the Congress. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Francie. Now, without further ado, let's get started. And welcome to the session on health, safety, and dignity of sanitation workers. As we race towards achieving SDG 6 by 2030, the session highlights one of the most vulnerable members of the society, sanitation workers. Sanitation an unaccounted number of workers around the world labor in hazardous and stigmatizing conditions that violate their dignity and basic human rights. This session will throw light on some of the efforts and initiatives that are being carried out by organizations to improve the condition of workers' lives. Now, without further ado, let's go ahead and listen from four speakers from all over the world. And the first to speak would be Ruth Kennedy Walker from the Sanitation Workers Initiative, represented by World Bank, SNV, WaterAid, WHO, and International Labour Organization. She will be presenting the guidelines and regulations and operating procedures for occupational health and safety of sanitation workers. Ruth is a senior water supply and sanitation specialist at the World Bank, and she's currently based in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, leading the water supply and sanitation engagements in the country. She's also leading and contributing to other projects in East and Southern Africa region, and she's a core member of the CY Citywide Inclusive Sanitation Team and a contributor to the Joint Sanitation Workers Initiative. So over to you, Ruth.
Thank you. Sorry, let me, you can see my screen, right?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, I'm on the wrong slide. 2 seconds, slight technical hitch. Okay, you can still see it, right? Okay, great. Thank you, everybody, and thank you for that warm welcome. So yes, I'm here today to talk about sanitation workers and specifically institutionalizing occupational health and safety as part of a larger initiative, which I will discuss a little bit more about in a minute. So firstly, just to give a background, what the activity is focusing on and why. So sanitation workers is an extremely broad category, one which covers everyone from professional, highly trained wastewater engineers and utility managers to informal micro enterprises that manually empty pit latrines, desludge septic tanks, and unblock sewers. The latter group often work in extremely challenging conditions where they're exposed to hazards such as chemical, microbial, and physical and psychosocial hazards that could pose serious dangers to their health and safety. Their legal status is sometimes in question. For example, in cities where certain types of manual emptying is illegal, but there is a high demand for the service, which is often much cheaper than licensed legal emptiers. Workers also face social stigma and discrimination and can find it extremely difficult or impossible to find alternative safer work. Achieving the SDGs requires that sanitation workers of all types are recognised legally and protected, both socially, legally, and technically. And there is no, and just to note that there's no easy fix for this issue, and improving the lives and safety of these workers will require a holistic, multi-pronged approach, legal, technical, and so and in the social arena, particularly as in many locations, this kind of work remains closely embedded with deep social, ethnic, or religious structures. So the framing and what this activity that I'm presenting today is trying to do, this brief presentation is trying to explore one aspect of this multi-pronged approach, the administrative controls that water operators, utilities, governments, and other stakeholders could put in place to positively change the ways in which people work in sanitation. So as I mentioned, it requires a holistic approach, and it's not just technical solutions, but the other legal and social elements that are needed. So this work is part of a larger initiative which started in 2018. You probably saw the logos of the very first slide. So it's an initiative led by the World Health Organization, the International Labour Organization, SNV, the World Bank, WaterAid, and also Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And it's made up of a number of different projects aiming to advocate for the health, safety, and dignity of sanitation workers. And today we're focused on one of those activities, which is on the work being done identifying existing occupational health and safety tools. And the key objective of this work is to reveal the gaps through which sanitation workers are falling and provide examples of good practices. So on that note, going to now talk about instruments that can change working practices along the sanitation chain. So examples of occupational health and safety instruments, this would cover legislation, so for example, acts, laws created by national, devolved city legislators related to sanitation, health and safety, and could be found in public health, building, planning, labour, workplace health and safety laws. Regulations relates to rules and sanctions, contractual relationships between service providers and utilities, between utilities and governments, and including how the quality of those services are measured, for example, key performance indicators. Also, it can include policies, so national and municipal policies on sanitation, water, environmental health, workplace health and safety, for example, any particular kind of sanitation related activity like sewer entry and maintenance. It could also relate to operational instruments, so standard operating procedures, training, vaccination, insurance schemes, sanitation safety plans, and finally also can be include standards. So example, ISO standards. So it could be to do with the construction of facilities that are designed with emptiers in mind, or work environments such as the use of chemicals. Could be national standards such as building standards, PPE standards, emptying technologies, example. But this work, and just to note, doesn't include PPE in its usage, so personal protective equipment, or technical designs of equipment such as desludging apparatus, etc. So it's really the work is focusing on the enabling environment that guides and encourages ways of working that better protect the sanitation workers. So here is a outline of a framework for mapping operational health and safety across the sanitation service chain. And here is an example. So it's very small, but it's really to map the existing. This was used to map existing instruments found globally. And this specific example is from Tamil Nadu state in India. And it's really to show, that across these different areas that I discussed across the chain, what is available and what type of instruments are available. So now I want to go into the overarching findings from this global review. So as the slide indicates, sanitation work and workers are becoming more prominent, but that is from a very low baseline. It's quite contextual. So in international standards, For more conventional, we see that, but for maybe for non-sewage sanitation, there's a lot less governing, like the conveyance, the emptying, etc. Some locations have significant gaps around non-sewage sanitation provision, especially in low and middle income countries. And what we see is sanitation policies or plans don't often prioritize health and safety. They tend to do more in of the workers, sorry, I should say, they tend to do more of the customers rather than the actual workers. So guiding principles for designing OHS instruments based on the review. So the first key insight, I suppose, is to take a multi-stakeholder approach. So as you can see, it includes not just the service providers, employees, public health experts. The second point there is to combine different types of barriers. So technical barriers, so hardware that actually moves workers away from direct contact with feces, managerial organizational barriers, so providing regulations, operational measures, and then socio-cultural behavioral barriers, so hand washing, proper use of PPE. We need to account for the study showed that we need to account for the short and long-term variables and differences, so seasonal and versus the actual practice of workers, like what do they feel comfortable wearing in certain environments, such as in hot weather. And a fourth finding is that the OHS instruments should refer to and reinforce each other. So, for example, regulations need a legal backing in legislation and policy. Operational instruments should refer to established standards. Key performance indicators used to assess organizational health and safety practices should be based on standard operating procedures. And then organizational training should be tied to those. So I think this is one of my final slides. So the final takeaway is implementation is crucial. So we see that there's plenty of operational health and safety instruments exist, but many sanitation workers continue to work unsafely. So there must be a clear allocation of responsibility and oversight to make sure that those instruments are implemented correctly. And this aligns to focusing on outcomes rather than inputs. Okay. I think, so just one final point, the existence of the operational health and safety tool does not mean the effective use of that tool. So that's my final slide. Thank you for listening. And if you want any more information on the initiative or this piece of work specifically, Kanika or myself, our emails are on the screen. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Ruth, for this very insightful presentation. For those who want to know more about the Sanitation Workers Initiative, please contact Kanika or Ruth. And let's jump into the next presentation now. We will hear from Jennifer Williams, who's the Executive Director of FSM Alliance, on a very innovative, different way to engage sanitation workers, called the Operator Skills Challenge or the World Pit Emptying Challenge. So over to you, Jennifer, to talk about this interesting initiative.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you're from. Let me just start the sharing the presentation now. Can everyone see? Yes? Okay. As Shobana mentioned, presenting on the World Emptying Challenge today. So what is the World Emptying Challenge? It is a challenge that was created going all the way back to 2017 at the 4th International Fecal Sludge Management Conference that was held in Chennai, India. And so we brought together teams of professional emptiers, both men and women, to simulate emptying. So it included building a mock pit latrine filled with simulated fecal sludge that's then put into barrels. And then there is a portion of the competition where they need to manually transport and also load the barrels to be taken away. So we set this up to try to simulate real life scenarios to the best of our ability. But the main purpose and objective, it's great to go after Ruth and hear about some of the challenges she highlighted for sanitation workers. And this emptying challenge was meant to really elevate the profile and the awareness of the emptier profession. It was also to help highlight the important and critical role that the emptiers play in achieving citywide inclusive sanitation. Oftentimes, these emptiers are the only people providing service to the lowest income communities in cities. We also wanted to raise awareness of safe, effective, and efficient FSM practices and techniques. And most importantly, we wanted to instill a sense of dignity, recognition, and empowerment to the emptiers by bringing them together with their peers and helping to elevate the profession, raise more awareness about it. We thought that that would help improve their own sense of pride about their profession as well. And also, of course, underline the need for more qualified professionals in the field. So the vision for the challenge moving forward is to integrate it into some of the professional practical skills events, such as the water skills. So thank you so much for inviting us here today. And also the world skills. So we've been in conversation with World Skills Africa, which will be held in 2022. Also hoping to increase the employability of sanitation workers and again, provide more peer-to-peer training and professional exchange between different emptying practices in different local contexts. Increase diversity in sanitation job opportunities, and also helping them professionalize and further their training. And then lastly, strengthen sanitation systems through a bottom-up approach that integrates skills and the know-how of pit latrine emptiers. So these are some of the challenge elements that I wanted to put here on the slide, so you can see this is the simulated pit latrine that we have built in the past. I believe this one was in Zambia, and then there is they are required to move the sludge through a pathway, as you can see, that tries to simulate the narrow passageways that they may be walking through, and then they also encounter different challenges, so spills that they have to clean up appropriately, and then you can see the loading onto the truck, and then lastly, most importantly, is also the use of the personal protective equipment and the disinfection at the end. So there is scoring criteria and prizes. They varied based on sponsorship. So they are scored on safety, effectiveness, efficiency, technique, teamwork, and then the use of the PPE and hygiene practices. So the challenges to date, you can see, again, going back to 2017 in Chennai, we did another in Cape Town at FSM 5, a Zambia-specific event in Lusaka in 2019, 2020 in Kampala at the Afro Congress, and then most recently, we were presented with the challenge to move it virtual for the FSM 6 conference, which was also held online. So we had an opportunity to translate the World Emptying Challenge into a virtual video challenge. And again, the objectives were the same: to provide emptiers a platform to showcase their work without traveling. So there were some criteria for the video submission guidelines. They had to be 3 minutes or less, and then demonstrated some of the scoring criteria that I went through before. And the event was also co-sponsored. All of the events have been co-sponsored with Borda, GIZ, BMZ, and the Susanna. So here are the impact. There were 23 global teams that submitted videos. We were able to offer cash prizes through the sponsorship with BMZ, and they were wired directly to the emptiers themselves. And all of the emptying videos were posted on our YouTube channel. So there were 70,000 worldwide views of all of the videos. And you can see we had two winning categories. One was a popular vote, which was simply purely the number of likes. And then we had a technical challenge as well. So you can see the top three finalists for both the popular vote and the technical challenge. And now I'd like to ask Motez to play the YouTube video.
I'm Semkoteka Baker, commonly known as Baker, Director, Brilliant Sanitation, the champion of World Emptying Challenge 2021. I'm so honored to have been the one who won the competition, because what I know, it has been a tough competition amongst all the teams. But surprisingly, with God's grace, we managed to be the winners. I'm so humbled and gratefully thankful to those ones, the organizers of FSM 6, please, we are very humbled and thankful to you because right now we are known worldwide. Our services are known worldwide. Now it's a great pleasure for us to say thanks to you people. You've really worked a lot towards promoting our services.
Hi everyone, this is Chuba from Zambia. I just want to appreciate and thank the organizers for organizing this event. We thank you for the platform where we are able to share our works from different parts of the world despite the COVID pandemic. I know it has been, or it was about winning, but really all of us are winners because it has given us an opportunity to see what our colleagues are doing from other parts of the world. So thank you to the organizers and thank you to all the teams that participated.
Thank you so much. So wanted to share that video with all of you to hear from how the emptiers, from the emptiers themselves, those were the two technical, first and second place technical challenges, challenge winners that you've heard. So we're currently looking at currently evaluating how we continue the World Emptying Challenge within in this new hybrid model of conferences moving forward. We did have more teams that were able to submit videos, so perhaps there's also a hybrid approach that we could take there as well. Of course, nothing replaces the excitement of watching the challenge live, but we know travel is still difficult for some parts of the world. So stay tuned on that, and thank you so much. Oops, sorry. Thank you so much, and Shabana, back over to you.
Thank you, Jennifer. I think this was a really nice video to see some of the challengers or some of the participants take part and also feel grateful or feel recognized through these events. For the audience, I think Jennifer is also spearheading the FSM conferences, and we're always looking for more utilities to join the skills challenges. So please contact FSM Alliance if you're interested in partnering or taking part in the future skills challenges. So our next speaker is from the Indian government, and Ms. Pamela Satpathy is an Indian administrative service agent who's currently the district collector of Yadadri Bhuvanagiri district of Telangana state in India. Previously, she was a municipal commissioner of city of Warangal in Telangana, and during her tenure as the municipal commissioner, Satpathy has commissioned the cause of engaging self-help groups of women from urban poor settlements. To provide service delivery, she has engaged such groups in operating the city's network of public toilets, manufacturing low-cost sanitary pads, and engaging sanitation workers, waste pickers, and transgender groups to undertake dignified livelihoods. So over to her to look at a very interesting case from India on how the lives of sanitation workers were improved. So over to you, Pamela.
Hello, good evening, namaste, and good morning to everyone out here. Thank you so much for having me here today. I'm very honored and glad to speak about a topic very close to my heart: health, dignity, sanitation workers. And I'm very happy to represent India and the government of Telangana in particular, for which I have been working for the last 5 to 6 years. Without taking much of your time and sticking to the 8 minutes time limit, I would like to make a presentation. So this is in particular my experience of working with Warangal. Can everybody see my slides?
Yes.
Yeah. So I, previous to my present engagement as a district collector of Yadadri Bhuvangiri district, I used to work as a municipal commissioner and vice chairman Urban Development Authority, and also the CEO and MD of Smart City Warangal. So just taking a look at the city profile, it is a 408 square kilometer wide city with nearly 1 million population. Earlier we had 58 wards. Right now, we have increased it to 66. And this is the profile of sanitation workers. We have around 3,078 formally engaged workers. Some are permanent, very few, in fact. 452 of them are contractual, who are engaged on a daily wage basis, and around 2,300 of them are outsourced through a third-party agent. So talking about the health, the safety, since most of them were outsourced workers, the social inclusion and the economic inclusion was a focus area. And we try to also look at how they feel in their work environment. So also talking about the dignity, and what we did is we tried to motivate them to federate themselves into self-help groups, and thereby trying to work with the most vulnerable among them. So this is one of our humble initiatives. Earlier, when I joined, I saw that none of them had uniforms, and each one of them came in their work clothes. So we tried to give them uniforms which is compatible to the local environment, like hats, caps, saris for the women, two sets of khakis and jackets for the men, and also shoes and other PPE equipments during the COVID pandemic. This is a picture of our distribution of the PPE equipments, and also we started giving them toiletries as well. Um, this is a training of sanitation workers where we taught them how to use the PPs, because most of them, despite having a set of PPs, were very unwilling and hesitant, complaining about the weight of the PPs and such things. We had two or three categories of sanitation workers, where the field level worker was called a sanitary worker, and the supervising level was called a sanitary jawan. So we tried to cut down on the petrol, and we tried to give them 200 cycles to the sanitary jawans, so that they could be more mobile, agile, and have better supervision on the sanitation of the city. Here, we started one more campaign called as a Red Dot campaign for sanitary workers, where we engaged the citizens in labeling the biohazardous waste, just like diapers or sanitary pads, with a red dot, so that when a sanitation worker comes to pick up the garbage in the daily door-to-door garbage collection, he or she will be aware of what is in that packet. And also, we had locally manufactured sanitary pads called as Cheli. Cheli in Telugu means sister. So we engaged our local women self-help groups to manufacture Cheli, and we offered them a buyback mechanism wherein two packets of sanitary pads were distributed each month to every female sanitary worker. Other than that, we had numerous government, central government and state government, local self-government schemes which were there for a long time, but our own sanitary workers, who also formed the poorest of the poor, had no access to them. So we conducted awareness camps, and we augmented their livelihood by getting them access to these entitlements from government. After that, just like I was mentioning previously, we federated our workers into self-help groups, and they were mostly from vulnerable occupations like waste pickers. Some were transgenders, and first time in the history of Warangal, we started working with transgenders. Although we had a sizable number of transgender population in the city, around 600 odd people, but we never thought of working with them previously. So we started federating them into the groups, and in a city which has a population of 10 lakhs, 1.6 lakhs of the population was federated into self-help groups. We gave um, we engaged our sanitation workers and vulnerable communities in the city sanitation by engaging them in service delivery paradigm. For example, giving them the maintenance of community toilets, public toilets, nurseries. For example, our government has a policy of having a nursery and a park for each ward, and we had 66 wards. So we could engage a sizable number of vulnerable communities from differently abled to transgenders in our nurseries, parks, and cafeterias. In fact, 64 public and community toilets were handed over to self-help groups. This is a video, but in the interest of time, if we are left out with some time, I would like to play the video. It is a story of a transgender a person. So, coming to the sanitation part of the story, we had the 24 dry resource collection centers where the household level segregated dry waste was brought into, and waste pickers who were informally doing the same tasks were brought into mainstreams. We provided them with identity cards bearing the name of the DRCC center wherein they were working, and SHGs were engaged in the operation of DRCC centers with the indirect supervision of the urban local body. So each of them could earn a sizable amount of 8 to 14,000 per month, apart from their regular any other job that they undertook for livelihood. In this process, we could recover 6,000 metric tons of dry waste. Uh, Coming to their support during the COVID pandemic time, we we uh, we were the first urban local body in our state government to complete the vaccination drive at a war-foot basis. In fact, I myself took the vaccine first because many sanitation workers were of the opinion that the life is as valuable as their meager monthly wages. So, in fact, to fight vaccine hesitancy, I personally took 2 jabs of the vaccine dose first before vaccinating our entire 3,000 odd workforce with 2 jabs of the vaccine. This was a process for building dignity and mutual trust among our workers. This We also started a fortnightly health camp. In fact, with personalized health cards, each of the 3,000 workers was given a health card, which you can see in the picture below. And the first camp enumerated all the non-communicable diseases or the ailments which they had, so that a doctor screening them fortnightly could gauge what is the health condition and diagnose them accordingly. And so after that, we also gave them, since initially the COVID, the pandemic had no cure, we started giving them immunity and immunity booster medicines for the pandemic. And we would supply them from our generic drugstore free of cost to each of our workers and their families. We also had held food camps and provided hot cooked meals for our workers, and started felicitating with a monthly incentive of rupees 500 to encourage them for coming out as frontline workers in the hard times. This is the training of sanitation workers, whom we had categorized into eight major categories, and accordingly we trained them with the help of UMC Asia. If you permit, I would go back to my video of Shalini and narrate her story of how she was begging as a transgender earlier, but she could earn a livelihood through maintenance of a community toilet, and went ahead to make it open defecation free in the future. In fact, she became. Yeah.
My name is Shalini. I'm a 34-year-old transgender working as a caretaker of a community toilet at Deen Dayal Nagar in Warangal, Telangana. I've been through a difficult childhood, trying to understand myself and where I belong. Over time, I was able to accept myself and my identity and identified myself as a girl. At 14, I changed my name from Krishna to Shalini. It wasn't easy. I faced tremendous reluctance and opposition from my family and even society. I ran away from home, only to return 2 years later, but was not accepted by my parents, as they feared my sisters will never get married, given my new identity as a transgender person. During this phase, I met people from the transgender community in Warangal who took me in. With no financial support at all, I took to begging on the streets, at traffic stops, in trains, and even outside shops to make ends meet. Today, under the DAY NULM and SPM Convergence Program, the Urban Management Center team, in collaboration with Greater Warangal Municipal Corporation and MEPMA, started forming self help groups of persons working in vulnerable occupations. Through this initiative, I enrolled as a member of the SHG. This gave me an opportunity to get access to earning a dignified livelihood through a contract for O&M of community toilets. I nominated myself as a caretaker for managing the facility and began earning a monthly income of Rs 16,000. My role was to be stationed at the community toilet from early morning to late evening, ensuring that the toilet block was kept clean and used by the local community. However, I began to notice that no one was using these toilets, and I decided to approach the people and interact with them. I started going door to door in the community to identify houses that did not have individual household toilets. I have begun a system of maintaining a chart and register at the toilet block with details of the local community members visiting the toilet block. I try to spread awareness amongst the community members to use the community toilets and the ill effects of defecating in the open. I'm very happy doing this work. Now, the community members even praise me and appreciate my efforts for keeping the toilets clean. Things have changed now. I have been accepted in the community, and even my family is happy to see me having a dignified and regular work. We, the transgender community, is now being recognized as part of society and being offered jobs and opportunities to start micro enterprises by GWMC. The other two initiatives for improving our livelihoods are maintenance of a garden or a nursery and even running a cafe. I am very grateful who believed in us, who gave confidence to me and provided us with dignified livelihood opportunities. We are looking forward for more such ventures.
So this was the story of Shalini, who in fact not just operated a community toilet, but went on to declare the area as open defecation free. In fact, it was the first of a kind initiative in my lifetime as well, working with transgenders. And like I already said, health, dignity, and the livelihood of sanitation workers has been a topic very close to my heart. And having been given the opportunity today, I'm very grateful. Thank you to all the organizers. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Pamela, for this very inspiring presentation and video. I think the Telangana government has just gone above and beyond in not only recognizing sanitation workers, but the most vulnerable among them, also recognizing other genders and breaking the binary system. So kudos to you and your team. Um, let's go ahead with the next presentation. And Kavita Vankade will explain about the research that IIHS has been doing in India with respect to OHS. So over to you, Kavita.
Thank you, Shobna. Can you hear me and can you see my slides?
We can hear you, but you're very feeble. Could you kindly increase your
Yeah.
volume?
Yeah. Is it better now?
Much better. Maybe it could be even better.
Okay. Better?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks for that. And you can see my slides, right?
Yes.
Yes. Thanks, Shobna, for the invitation. And thanks. Happy to be here. Good evening, everybody. I'm going to, like Shobna mentioned, I'm going to be presenting on occupational safety of desludging operators in India. Um, and just before I begin that, I just want to highlight one thing. Basically, that while I'm going to be speaking about desludging operators, just to recognize that there are many different kinds of sanitation workers, and you will see it on the screen of the different types that we've identified. They may be more, and the reason I bring this out there is that each of them has a separate role and carries a different risk, and which is something I will speak towards the end of the presentation. Also, like the earlier presentation, we've worked in multiple areas, including social protection and livelihoods. But the reason I put this slide up is here that there is a connect between these different initiatives and the occupational safety of workers, which again, I'll try to bring it together towards the end of the presentation. Moving to the study itself, this was a study carried out in two Indian cities, and I want to highlight that the context here was mechanized. It's not that they were manual pit emptiers, but the reason we did this study is that there is a range of safety issues associated even with them in a mechanized context. So the study that we did, it was a technical study, but I'm going to try and tease out the overarching kind of recommendation. But what we did was study the existing practices, identify the resulting safety concerns, and then try to see why these safety concerns existed, what were the underlying causes, and then develop a set of principles. I'm not going to speak too much about approach. I just want to highlight two things. One is we did an extensive documentation and spent really a long time with the sanitation workers themselves to understand. I guess this is important because every context is going to be a little different and every kind of workers carries a different kind of risk. And secondly, we also took a systems thinking approach, which meant that we did look not only at the workers and the safety issues, but also broader context, and again looked at focused on the underlying causes. Now, this the thing that you can see at the left hand side of the uh, slide, you probably can't read it obviously, but what this shows is that a desludging process, which we think is only 3 to 4 steps, is actually we broke it down to 55 steps across 4 zones of uh, going to the site, the process of desludging and final disposal. In some instances, there was entry into septic tanks, which is illegal, etc. But the point was that for each step that we identified, we saw what were the safety concerns and also what were the decision making points. So this is again just a deep dive into one part of the chain, but to just to kind of explain the process, that how it was done, that how steps were identified, and also to critical decision making points were identified. So what emerged? So what emerged was that there were three main safety concerns. One was inhalation of gases and or lack of oxygen or asphyxiation. And this is very critical because while further in-depth study needs to be done in that, it's very clear that this is one of the possible causes of deaths because of the workers falling unconscious or feeling giddy. And it has a range of reasons, including the fact that some of the septic tanks are not constructed in the way it should be, do not have vent pipes. We are hearing also a lot about the composition of the toilet cleaners themselves changing and adding to the toxic mix that is there in the tank. Second safety concern that emerged was contact with sludge, which leads to a lot of skin infections, gastrointestinal problem, again multiple points of contact. And finally, physical injury. This also happened at multiple stages and for a variety of reasons, whether it was unsuitable work environments or sharp objects, unsafe or even unsafe tools. So if you see the photograph on the right side, a woman is trying to break open a septic tank which doesn't have a proper lid with just some kind of a rod. So these are obviously not tools that have been designed for a problem that are actually not supposed to exist on the ground, because actually septic tanks are supposed to have links. So this just shows that because of the non-standard variation of septic tanks, and this is the case I think pretty much everywhere, and because of different kinds of reasons, there are these safety concerns. There were a few others, but I'm just going to focus on these. Once we had these safety concerns, what we did was try to understand the underlying causes and then come up with what are the different kind of recommendations for the improvement. We also talked to the workers. The key point about the workers was these workers had gone from manual to semi-manual to mechanical, so they actually did not perceive risk. They could also not make the connect between the diseases they were facing or the health issues they were having and the safety. However, two things. One is they were very aware that it's obviously not their fault for many of the risks they found. For example, they were very vehement about the fact that household puts things like blade inside the septic tank, etc., which or other menstrual products which causes blockages. And second, they had a keen sense of what are the things that would help to make it better for them. And when we came up with recommendation, it was through extensive consultations with them, understanding what they wanted. So this is after all this was done, this was the hierarchy of control that I was mentioning. Many people in the audience may be aware, but I'm just going to take like 30 seconds to explain it. So one is that this is a pyramid that's standard and it's used by CDC and used in other hazardous industries, and this is in a decreasing importance, right? So if you look at it, the bottom of the pyramid is personal protective equipment, which we often talk about given COVID, right? But that's the last step of defense. And there are all the other things like elimination, which is removing the hazard, or engineering control, which is isolating people. And I'm going to speak about some of these examples, which actually contribute much more towards protection of the worker. And this is basically falling into the category of moving from prevention, and the last step is protection. So, looking at elimination and substitution, first thing on the elimination front is that you can't remove the hazard itself of desludging. What we could remove is the reason for the workers getting into the tank. This happens for functional reasons like blockages, which have a host of things one can do, which I'm going to address later, or people maybe lack of awareness on the part of the household of workers, etc. And for that, a series of messaging, which is a series of key awareness messages, which is on the right side, would help. Or you have a substitution mechanism, so which is moving from manual to mechanical. In our the context of the study we studied, it was not relevant, but that's the primary substitution mechanism. Moving on to engineering controls and administrative controls. Again, I not don't want to get into the detail, but see, if you look at the engineering control side, you will see a range of things are there which can improve the safety. So it ranges from tools, whether it's for blockage removal or air blowing, goes on to ensuring that the septic tanks are properly constructed, or even little bit improvisation if required, to the design of the tanks themselves, to the design of the disposal facilities. So you can see that the gamut of interventions that are possible to improve safety is a huge set in the engineering controls. On the administrative controls, we talk about standard operation procedures, but we have to remember that the operation may not be standard because it's an informal sector. The trucks are different, the tanks are different, and that's why in addition to an SOP, we do need a do's and don'ts which are more generic, and also some kind of an emergency protocol because emergencies will increase. So this is again giving you a snapshot of engineering controls and administrative controls. Moving on to PPE, I am not going to again going into design of PPE and things like that, but I want to highlight two things. One is that we often provide PPE and then we say that the workers are not using them. But the fact of the matter is, and the workers we talk to, they have many valid reasons. So, for example, if the boots or the gloves are not designed properly, even if they're loose fitting, these PPE can actually increase risk instead of decreasing risk, right? So, well designed things, training and sensitization for usage. And finally, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. When I'm saying not well designed, it just also means that there are things available in the market. We just need to be adapted and retrofit a bit longer. So, in conclusion, the two things. One is these are so that was on desludging operators. Now we started looking at other operators, and as you can see, the safety concerns are slightly different for the different kind of workers. And this is just to put out there and say that we really need to look at. We cannot customize every time, but we do need to look at different roles differently and see what safety concerns are there, and hence what can be done for safety. And in the last point, few points I want to make. One is that PP is the last line of defense, which I've already said. There are multiple points of entry. There are multiple stakeholders responsible. It cannot be only put on the workers. There is, of course, the government involved, but also households for responsible behavior, etc. I also want to highlight that many operators in the two cities, but often in India, these are small, really small enterprises. They often just own one truck. So we need to also see if you're putting safety initiatives and they cost money, who's going to bear the cost of money and how do we make that work? And again, like I said, there are narrative that sanitation workers don't care about their own safety, which is not true because one I said is they may have functional reasons for not using certain equipment, but also their overall vulnerability is very high, and this is something that's been highlighted by other presenters also. They may not have adequate health access. They may not be living in vulnerable conditions. In that context, for them, the safety concerns that they have are not really occupational ones, and I think any work that's why we need to do with them around safety also has to include these larger concerns. Otherwise, uh, it's not relevant for them. And I just want to conclude by saying that it is very important to work with sanitation workers, not look at them as beneficiaries, but actually work with them in designing their own initiative, because they have been in this profession and they know the risk, and they often also have some kind of answers to how to go forward. So it's very important to work with them. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Kavita, for giving us. Kavita, could you kindly mute yourself? I think there's an echo. Thank you, Kavita, for giving us insights into how, into what exactly is the problem on the ground, and how you have involved sanitation workers in trying to improve their conditions and see where exactly the bottlenecks are. In the interest of time, I would just like to go ahead and start with a very short panel discussion with all our speakers. Ruth would unfortunately not be able to join us, but Jennifer, Pamela, and Kavita are present to answer a few questions. Um, so the first question for Jennifer. Jennifer, how are actually helping improve OHS on the fields like operational health and safety, and how do the challenges actually help in ensuring that the sanitation workers are not marginalized?
Yeah, thanks. We're looking at what we can do actually to improve the health and safety. So it was great that in Ruth's presentation, she mentioned some of the mechanisms that would be available to do that. So we're going to be spending a lot of 2022 looking at different types of standards that we might be able to help contribute to the safety for the workers. I also felt it was really important to play the video as well to hear from the MDers directly. We tried to get one available for the session today, but weren't able to. So that's why I chose to play the video, because I think it's really important to remain in close contact. And it was great to see some of the other examples as well, really engaging the MDers and workers themselves directly. Yeah.
Thank you, Jennifer. So over to Pamela now. So Pamela, what do you think are the most important measures that local governments should take in order to improve the health safety of sanitation workers? What do you think? How do you think it can be scaled up in other cities or other countries, for example?
Yeah. When it comes to sanitation workers, you know that most of them are engaged through outsourcing agencies, especially in third world countries. I would like to point out. So what happens is insurance and health benefits are a major gray area. So I think that is something which we can look upon as a policy decision, not just in piecemeal fashion in urban local bodies. In fact, what I have seen is during the pandemic, they were the frontline workers cleaning every isolation facility and every COVID care ward. In fact, emptying out the drains and the garbage bins. But when they themselves got COVID, we hardly had any institutionalized mechanism in place to make them look at it as a fallback option. So what I personally did is I started a crowdfunding initiative along with my friend, and we could raise 2 million Indian rupees, so 20 lakh rupees. So what we could do is we could give them around of course, government was providing a standardized COVID kit, which had medicines, sanitizers, and toiletries to every COVID affected person, including the sanitation workers. But what happened is, other than that, they also ended up spending a substantial amount when COVID took a serious turn. For example, in terms of X-ray or the lung treatment. So we could spare very minimal from that 20 lakh rupees, let us say 5,000, 10,000 to each worker. But we were surprised to see how positively they were benefited with that meager amount. So I would request to have all the policymakers out there to have a fallback option or a health benefit and institutionalized insurance mechanism for the sanitation workers in particular, especially looking at the outsourcing workers in every urban local body.
Thank you, Ms. Pamela. Now, the next question is to Kavita. Kavita, you did mention that um, not one size fits all, so you would have to really study and look at the condition of workers in every scenario. But given the huge amount of people that are being served and the amount of sanitation workers, for example, in India and other developing countries, what strict measures do you think can be integrated into policies apart from PP usage of PPEs?
Thanks, Shobna. So when I said more studies are needed, one, I think, there is a cumulative learning. So once we are able to pick up and do a few more studies with different workers, it should be easier. In terms of what can be done, I feel if you're looking in technically, I think apart from PP, I think focus on tools would help a lot, because sometimes it's the appropriate tools which would tend to help better than some of the PP itself. I think working with sanitation workers for training, and when I use the word training, I don't mean uh, telling them what to do, but work with them to make them aware of various, both the importance and some of the technical aspect would work. I also think, and I really think this is, I don't know if you're ever going to win this, but if it comes to desludging, I think a lot of upstream intervention in terms of standardization of septic tanks, or at least some behavior of households, would really have an impact down the line. I know it's a little impractical, so yes, but I do think some movement towards that would really make a lot of benefit the safety of the workers. Hello?
Shobhan, I think you're still muted.
I'm sorry for that. I just wanted to thank Kavita and wanted to jump back to Jennifer again on how do you think you can improvise these challenges based on past experiences? Are you planning to introduce new techniques or involve a bigger crowd, let's say, because most people may not use the same kind of emptying techniques that are currently incorporated into the challenges?
Yeah, thanks, Shobana. I think we're looking at really trying to determine how we can continue the in-person challenges while also combining some of the video aspects that we did for FSM6. We saw a lot more teams be able to join because they didn't need to travel. So I think that's something that we're really looking at right now, because it is difficult to often get sponsorship for all the teams to travel, and they can't compete in person unless they're able to travel. So I think that's one area we'd of course love to have them all, or as many as possible, but that's really a funding limitation. So I think that's why we're really looking at how we can strike a nice balance with the video submissions as well. Maybe there's a in-person challenge and a video challenge, just to try to increase the outreach. I know some of the emptiers that we spoke to also really appreciated seeing some of their other colleagues, what they're doing. So the same way that we exchange our projects and different initiatives at other conferences as well. So they were also experiencing the same thing. But it is hard. There's a limit to what we can do in person, especially with a little bit of travel uncertainty at the moment. But the funding is really the biggest issue for the emptiers. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Jennifer. We hope that there are more partners in the future to make this a bigger event and really take it to the world skills. And Uh, Pamela, I have one last question for you. Often the problem is public perception and how society thinks about sanitation workers. Do you think your interventions and provision of PPEs have actually impacted the public as well and how they view sanitation workers? Could you please elaborate about it?
Yeah, thanks, Shobna. Yeah, public perception is a very critically determining factor in sanitation. Because everyone thinks that sanitation is the sanitation worker's job. If nobody thinks that it's their own job. So while disposal of garbage, for example, in Warangal, we had a major problem of open drains. We did not have UGD, underground drainage network as such. So what happened is everybody would even throw solid waste into the open flowing drains. So there was no particular differentiation between sewerage network, and waste also found its way into the drains, and that's where disposal of waste was a major hazard. And talking about the PPE in this context, when sanitation workers were given PPE, I found a very typical problem in that, because we had gumboots, we had jackets, and we had gloves which were elbow long, and sanitation workers in fact found it inconvenient to wear those and enter into the drains, because water would enter into uh, uh, the gumboots or the gloves and start itching 5 minutes into the job. In fact, they would just come out of the drain, throw it away, and start working with their bare hands and legs. Initially we started even finding them because we could not make sense of why they were behaving in a particular manner, negligent, utterly negligent of their own standards of health. But when we realized what they were going through, we realized that this is a major what is called design intervention is needed, rather than just supplying them with PP. So PP also has to be very relevant to the usage, the weather, the context. And talking about public perception, we were, when public themselves started wearing a mask and started wearing it for 10 long minutes and started feeling inconvenient to breathe, they started realizing how a sanitation worker would feel when loaded with such heavy PPs and asked to clean their colonies, the drains, and the sewerage network. So that is where I have seen post COVID a lot of resident welfare associations coming forward to give comfortable PPs. For example, rubber slippers or small length gloves, disposable N95 masks to the sanitation workers on behalf of the government, and felicitate each and every sanitation worker, garland them with flowers post COVID-19 pandemic. So that is the major public perception that we saw, which came after the what do you say, extensive usage of PPs in the public domain. That's all I can say about it.
Thank you, Pamela. So the last question would be directed towards Kavita. Kavita, now a lot of utilities are also expanding to non-sewer sanitations, and there's also a lot of public-private partnerships here, where the private sector is also trying to play a role along with utilities. So, what do you think the utilities here should do to ensure that the private sector is protecting the health and safety of sanitation workers?
So, this is not my opinion, but a lot of sanitation workers that we have spoken to, actually, their biggest demand is that they are taken on payroll of urban local bodies. Because, and we were very surprised, there are issues there also, but the more contractual it gets and the more it goes through the private sector, they feel they don't have various access, not just for safety, but insurance and other things that are there. So that it doesn't answer your question, but this is a demand from them. Now, as far as private sector goes, one is better than a private sector at times. I know there's a wide range. Sometimes just their collectives and cooperatives or SHGs work better. So, for example, in one of the cities in Tamil Nadu, in the waste picking session, there is a marked difference when a ULB engages with a private contractor who then subcontracts versus a women led collective. And what the government can do if it has to go with the private sector, I think there is the usual thing of contracting and stuff like that. But I think contracting is important, but I think leading by example would also be equally important. So not a direct answer, but I do think that it's not just public private, but there's also the SSGs and the cooperatives in that mix.
Thank you, Kavita. With this, we come to the conclusion of the session, and I really thank all the wonderful female speakers who were present in the session. And to conclude, I would just like to have one punchline from all of the panelists on sanitation workers and the future. Jennifer, do you want to go first?
Sure, I would say all sanitation workers matter.
Pamela, could we have a punchline from you to end the session?
Yeah, so I always use this. I'll use this one more time. If you want a clean city, sanitation is your job, not the sanitation workers' job.
Thank you. And over to you, Kavita.
Yeah, I think this is for all sanitation professionals. I think we're very used to looking at sanitation systems and workers last, and I think we need to reverse that order and put workers, them, he or she, up center, and then everything should go around that.
Yeah, with these powerful conclusions, we come to the end of the session. So thank you all for joining us. And I hand over to Francisca Folk from UN Habitat.
Thanks, ladies. That was a great, inspiring session, and totally deserved the 20-minute extension. And I think we could go on for even longer. Oh, sorry, my camera is not on. Let me turn it on. So our colleague Matis can now play a nice closing video, and we'll wrap up here and hope to meet again soon, online or offline. Thanks, and have a good day or evening, everyone. Bye.
What? Already over? No, we have plenty more options to continue the discussions and peer exchange beyond the Congress.
Tell me more. What are the options?
Well, SHIWOPA membership, for example. By becoming a member of SHIWOPA, everyone can connect to a global alliance of practitioners and experts. There are two ways of becoming a member. First, institutional members. Institutions can participate in SHIWOPA's assemblies and are eligible to run and vote in its international steering committee elections. Or second, individual members. Individuals can connect and engage with peers in the online SHIWOPA community. We have created a space that allows for networking and easy communication. Meet future WOP partners, stay up to date on project opportunities, and participate in peer-to-peer learning opportunities.
Sounds great. How can I join?
Simply go to www.shiwopa.org and register for free. If you want to know more, you can follow SHIWOPA on social media and subscribe to the newsletter. Thanks for joining the 4th Global TOPS Congress. We'll see you soon.